Susan Word. She is the president of Forward Connections, LLC. Her background includes 20 years in human resources management and 15 years in operations management. She has been a leader in private and public sectors, which include a variety of industries such as semiconductor manufacturing, electronics testing, municipal government, public utilities, outsourced sales, medical services. In addition to her consulting firm, she teaches the Human Resources Certification Prep course at Austin Community College and Temple College. She started her career in the U.S. Army as a commissioned officer and Black Hawk helicopter pilot. So be respectful. As a conscientious veteran, she is an active volunteer with the Employer Support of Guard and Reserve and active in Human Resources Professional Association. She has a Master of Arts degree in Human Resources Development Leadership from the University of Texas at Austin. And she's going to talk about online applications. That's something that I know you all just love. Susan Word.
Well, thanks. So, yeah, that whole bio, and there's one thing that everybody will remember and nothing else. You know, it was cool. You know, and I have to admit, you know, compared to many of the veterans within the last 20 years, my stint didn't compare in excitement, but it sure was fun for the military to pay for me to learn how to fly helicopters and then go do it over in Germany for 3 years. So thank you, Uncle Sam. And so I do try to do as much as I can where I can to help veterans or train other HR folks to try to pick out those skill sets that are transferable from veterans, because oftentimes they can't make that language transition. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I could get on all kinds of soapboxes. I'll try to stay on this one today. Not quite a year ago, back in May or June of last year, I worked for a company called Invenio Solutions. It was acquired by another company, and they kept a small portion of folks, and everyone else became, as the word goes, redundant, right? I'd been a consultant for a couple of years before. Some friend of mine recruited me into that role. But, you know, after those 2 years, I decided that, you know, I'd go out and I'd look at the job market again and see what it is. And ultimately, I decided to just reconnect with my consulting company because I think that I can make a better impact that way. But during that couple of months, probably about 3 months, that I actually was actively looking in the job market and hadn't done that in quite some time, I became just as frustrated as you guys are with all the different variations of online applications and which way they go and how they're structured and how friendly or not friendly they are. So, you know, you just have to put up with it. You know, if you're going to get a job, you have to play each individual company's game. But there are a few tricks that you can do to get ahead of the game to make it easier to sort of copy and paste or upload things. And so I figured I would talk about that a little bit today. So the first thing is that, you know, you can you know, think about the tools that you use early on. I made a couple of, well, I made one file in my, on my desktop that had several different things that what I could do was then go and grab stuff out of that and throw into the online application. Because some applications, all you do is upload your resume. You have no idea what happens to it after that, but there you go, right? Same thing with clicking on the Indeed, apply now, right? Uploads the resume, poof, black hole. So as you sort of go through that, it's like trying to, first you kind of got to keep track of who all you send it to. And how many in here have multiple resumes? Good for you. But then you got to remember which one you sent, right? This was quite a few years ago, but I was interviewing for a position, it was sort of some of the early days of Monster and Career Builder and some of those other things. Indeed really wasn't a blink yet, so I'm old. But when I did, I got the interview and I came all prepared, had my little briefcase, my little folder with my spare resumes in there, ready to pull one out for the interviewer to show how prepared I was. And I looked across the table when she sat down and she had a different resume in her. She was like, ooh, I put that sucker back in there. I see you've got my resume, I won't give you one. Right? But yeah, there's all those things, and I know a lot of the other speakers have probably told you about preparing for interviews and all of those things. But having multiple resumes and having those tools to be able to shift information quickly, because some applications online, like I said, are pretty quick and can parse your information, and others you literally have to fill out, and it'll take you 30 minutes to an hour or more in some cases, right? There have been cases, and I shun the HR people that allow this to happen. But there are cases where I literally was applying for a job that I thought was a pretty cool job. And I got so frustrated with the application process, I moved on. And I don't want to work for a company that makes me go through that kind of stuff, right? So if you can make it as easy as possible on yourself to get through that stuff, the better. So some of the little tools that I have, you know, in my arsenal, so to speak, are, don't you love those military words? I just throw them out there, even after a jillion years. So make a list of all the previous jobs that you've had. Write down the things that you've done, your accomplishments. Think about, you know, if you were to use those on a resume or on an application. So, you know, when you write them in sort of those bullet forms where it makes it easy so you can copy and paste it. If you write, you know, a 3-paragraph description, no application is going to take that. Think about the key words that are effective for that job. And you know, there are some cool tools out here, and I know there's a bunch of software folks and all of that, but there are some tools out there like Wordle and things that you can find out what keywords are that pertain to certain jobs or job descriptions. So find those keywords and list those keywords and make that list for every job that you've had, so that when you are applying, you can go over and copy and paste those things, or you can use those keywords in different places. Some applications have a spot for words or key things that you've used, and you can throw in some of those keywords. Because those parsing applicant tracking systems sometimes are only looking for those key things that that they particularly have identified. And you won't know what they are, but if you don't have them, you can get kicked out of the system pretty easily. So make that list. It may be a long list, but make that list so that you can adapt it. And then when you make your, you know, additional resumes or adapt a cover letter, something like that, you have that work already done for you. So invest the time in listing all your old stuff. Some of the other things that you can do is make a list of all your previous employers with all their contact information. You ever get down there, you're sitting there, and they ask you for where you used to work, and it's like all the address, the phone number, and you know, who was the cafeteria hostess or what. But they will ask you a lot of questions about that. Go ahead and have that list so you can go ahead and copy and paste it into there. You know, frankly, half the companies that I used to work for aren't in existence anymore. But I got them on the list of where they used to be, right? And then draft your cover letters. You know, and again, I'm not going to go into the detail of how to do that or where your cover letters need to be and all of that. But draft a couple of things just like you have a couple of different resumes, and have some spots in there where you can tailor them, right? So most of it is the same, but you have specific areas where, you know, when you highlight them and you set them up in Word or wherever so that it kind of keys you in on what areas to change, so that you don't send one to Trilogy and it still has Salesforce on it, right? Probably not a good thing. But draft a cover letter template and then figure out what you're going to do when you are actually applying for a job. So you can use their terminology to throw in there, or something that you want to highlight in your experience, but you don't have to rewrite a cover letter every single time. So they want you to have a unique cover letter. Well, it's unique if you throw in 2 or 3 additional sentences and change the names to protect the innocent, right? And then you've already said, you've got a couple of different resumes already. Depending on where, you know, everybody has a different philosophy, and as many people as you have look at your resume, you will get that many opinions. Some will say, oh, it needs to be chronological. Others say functional, whatever. Use what it is that's going to highlight your skills and your abilities best. And then make them so they can be adapted. So I particularly use a functional resume. One, I'm too dang old to have the chronological one because nobody wants to know all that. But I highlight the particular functional areas that I am known for, my strengths are, that sort of thing. And so when I'm applying, if the role is more HR management, I put the HR management up top. If I'm applying for a job where it may be organizational development, I move those things up top. And I can shift them around fairly easily depending on what I want somebody to see first. So have the cover letter and have the resumes, but have them, you know, set up to be adaptable for you. And then list work-related references. Go ahead and have your list made with their phone numbers and their email addresses of all of the folks that you want to use as references, and have more than you will need, right? So go ahead and have those lists so that, again, you don't have to think about it in the middle of trying to make that application. Any questions on some of this prep work? It takes a lot of time. It does take a lot of effort, but it will save you time and effort in the long run and maybe make it a little less frustrating once you actually open up the application. All right, so then once you get that stuff, check, what do you look like online? Have you Googled yourself lately? Have you looked at your LinkedIn profile? What are you saying, or have you liked, or have you ranted about on social media? What can you do to improve your online presence? Right? So get all of those things set up, you know, in your preparation as you're getting ready to apply, before you're actually in the application process and somebody is looking you up on one of those social media platforms and goes, whoa, that's something interesting. Or, boy, that's an old, outdated LinkedIn profile. You know, what are they really doing? Or that doesn't match the resume. So keep those things in mind. And then talk to your references. Tell them you may be applying, you may use them. You will let them know when somebody asks you for a reference. But go ahead and prep them well in advance. I will tell you, we had a conversation the other day and they said, oh, well, people won't use, I never call references because people don't use references that'll give them a bad reference. Oh, how fun that is when I'm the calling party and I'm calling the reference. You're expecting that somebody's going to say glowing things, right? And they go, oh my gosh, let me tell you a couple of things, right? Yeah, it's like, ooh, that's interesting. Not only did they not prep their reference, but they didn't even know what kind of reference they were going to be getting. So prep your references. And when you're prepping your references, tell them the kind of jobs you're looking for. Tell them the kind of things that you're doing. They also become your network, right? They start looking for you. They hear things and they'll go, oh, by the way. So definitely prep those guys. How many of you have done these things already? Oh, good. This side of the room gets an A+, oh, sort of B over here. Okay. Like you got time. You can get it done. And so then you have to decide whether or not to apply or not to apply. I told you my story. I have been on those sites and just became so frustrated with the possibility I just really didn't apply. And that's really a shame because people, if people get frustrated with the process, they're losing out on good talent, right? Not only did they lose out on me, but who else did they lose out on, right? It's your decision. You can decide whether or not to apply if the company is something that is a company that you want to be a part of or not. So you get to make those decisions before the company does. So make them judiciously and do some preparation work. You know, what does the job description say? There's a lot that's in that job description that's really unwritten. How it's written is going to tell you a little bit about the company. What are some of the things that you have seen in job descriptions that either made you want to apply for them or that you ran running and screaming? Yes, ma'am.
I can remember one of the advantages of being my age. I remember when the civil rights laws were passed and the Department of Labor sent teams all over the country to review the applications and maybe even the interview questions of companies that did interstate commerce or had federal contracts, which is pretty much all the major companies.
Right.
And they took out lots of things like those lists of diseases and things about when did you graduate from high school and date of birth and all the discriminatory questions. And I notice now a lot of those very same questions that were disallowed back then have made their way back into applications. Yeah. And without anything like optional or anything like that. And they're inappropriate and in many cases illegal questions. Yeah. And it's not like this won't be kept, with your application. It's right in there. And nobody seems to care. Or do you know anything about that?
I actually have seen a few where I just left things blank or put NA on stuff because it was not a question that I was willing to answer. Now, good job, right? So the thing is that smaller organizations in particular, I don't know about the larger ones so much, but I know oftentimes the smaller organizations or the startups and things don't really have skilled HR people putting that stuff together for them.
And sometimes they're not covered.
Yeah. Well, everybody's covered on discrimination. from one employee on. You don't get to discriminate based on certain things. And so, you know, with very few exceptions, right? Religious organizations and things like that. So, you know, if, you know, mom and pop kind of organization put together, you know, a job posting or an application that's asking those kind of things, I like to say sometimes they don't know no better, or they want to plead that they don't know any better. Yes. And so, one, that's generally not a company that I'm going to apply for. But two, you know, I have, and probably it's because I'm in HR and I feel more obligated to, but I have written an email back to them and said that there are some inappropriate things that are in their job application or in their job posting. Because, you know, there's some very specific things that should and should not be in there. And it's all the discriminatory things, but there's also things having to do with physical qualifications and things too. Education qualifications and convictions of convictions for you know, any kind of criminal background. And so those things are not supposed to be in any application. Well, no, it's not that education is not supposed to be in the application, but education is not necessarily a qualifier in or out in a lot of jobs. It shouldn't be a qualifier in or out. If the job requirements don't actually require you to have a degree, putting a degree requirement in there is not really appropriate. So, now on the application, they will ask you for your education, and that's fine. But does it really apply to the job?
Because I've been refused specifically because the job posting said you had to have a degree.
And some, yeah, you know, some folks are going to make that a discriminator one way or another. But is it really a requirement for the job? That's something that those folks that are posting it need to be better at.
There was an appeals court ruling recently that where a job seeker was ruled against on age discrimination.
Yes.
And the appeals court said this only applies to internal applicants.
Yep.
Now, that's bound to go up higher, and, yeah, but there are rulings that are sort of pushing
Yeah.
the envelope on.
And there are a lot of things. There are a lot of those things that are still in the courts and things. So those change daily. The things are, and the reality is that not every company and not every HR department or recruiting folks, you know, within an organization are going to keep up with those rulings, right? Just like not everybody, you know, may not know that you can't have the thing on the application that asks you if you have a criminal conviction. Yeah, they're not supposed to ask that until after the offer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I recently had applied to a company. It's kind of a mom and pop, but they're local, and I went through all the different interview phases and had a phone interview with the founder and the CEO. And on my resume, I don't have dates on my education, right? And I mean, it tells you everywhere that that's
Right.
Yes.
if you're a certain age, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So he comes out and he goes, oh, so when did you graduate from college? And I was like, wow, okay, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
After I finished.
I'm going to go
Right. After I got all the yeah. Did you answer the question?
I did.
Yeah.
And it's either, I mean, if I said, well, I don't really want to answer that, I might as well just hung up the phone. So.
Yeah. As an HR director, I have sat in with hiring folks that were asking questions and had to stop them in mid-question and say, oh, sorry, candidate, that is not a fair question for you, and you know, took the hiring manager outside and had a little conversation before we finished. Yeah, sometimes nobody's sitting in the room with them, and they'll ask those questions. And you have to make the decision for yourself to say, you know, I don't feel comfortable answering that particular question, you know, and try to make it as generic as possible. But it puts you in a tough spot as the job seeker. But it is, you know, against all the rules to ask those things. Yes, ma'am.
One thing I've noticed lately, and I don't know if this is akin to just the Austin job market or just in general, but oftentimes the list of qualifications does not jive with how the job is being positioned, you know, on the job site. For example, it might be positioned as an entry-level job, or the salary might be such that it's an entry-level job. But then the qualifications are master's degree, experience, you know, in education, blah, blah, blah. Like, what the heck? You know?
Yeah, you know, that's another one that, you know, in the application process is hard to figure out because, frankly, in the Austin job market, they know that it's always sort of a buyer's market.
Yeah.
And so they're going to ask for as much experience and the long list of qualifications as much as possible. And some of it is that, and I think I was going to talk about this here in a second, but the statistics are that if you look at a job posting, the differences between male and female. A male will look at the job posting and go, I can do that, right? And a female will look at the job posting, and if they do less than 90% of it, will think that they're not qualified and not apply. Okay. I have a kind of a rule of thumb, but it's really breakable at every at every moment, and that is that, you know, if you hit at least 50% of the qualifications, apply. You know, don't not apply just because this laundry list of qualifications is on there. It's probably on there because it's their wish list. And it's also on there because there was somebody that was in that role that was perfect, and they left, and they want to replace that individual, right? And frankly, they're not going to get that individual back, but they're, you know, they try to show who this person is by all of these qualifications. And half of them aren't realistic, you know. So if you do have part of them, you know, apply. You should have, if they separate out the job duties are and some minimum qualifications, like you have to have a degree, you have to have some specific qualification or certification or something. 90% of the time, those things are going to get weeded out in the applicant tracking process. So, you know, applying without those bare minimum qualifications are probably going to get you kicked out of the system. You know, that's just sort of the reality. You had a question first, and then you, and then you.
Oh, yeah, I had one, and it wasn't a legal thing, but it was just be ready for vague directions. You're going to be working on your own, be ready for vague directions, and expectations are going to be shifting. And I was like, okay, I know that that's the case in every job, right? That I always happen. But they're telling me that before I apply. It must be extra bad there, and I
Well, that's, you know, yeah, you know, you do kind of look into and read into those jobs, right? What are they really saying here? And that was really sort of my question on the you know, what do you see in those job postings? Because there are a lot of those things that will tell you about the culture of the company. They will tell you about what that rule is. What'd you say?
So if they want somebody highly flexible.
Oh, right. Well, I do yoga, so that makes me flexible. But yeah, so think about, you know, do I even want to apply to that position, right? Before you waste your time applying to something that, you know, and I've done it, I've applied to positions before, and then they actually call me back. It's like, Now what do I say? Right? So, and, you know, you got to have so many that you apply for your TWC thing, you know, make that happen, and then they call you back. But yeah, so think about, are you really qualified for the job itself? And then research the company. Before you make that application, before you go through the time and the pain to go through the application process, research the company. Now, you may not research it as in-depth as you do when you are getting ready for an interview, but research it. You will find out some things of, well, you know, they just laid off about 1,000 people. You know, me and my closest friends, 2,000 of us from North Texas were laid off. That's how I ended up in Austin. Yes, ma'am.
I was researching a company on Glassdoor, and there were lots of good, you know, reviews on there. And then there was one that said, "Don't believe those good reviews. Our HR department hacked the employee accounts so they could post these positive reviews."
You two have questions.
Actually, asked because there were a lot of negative reviews on Glassdoor. So I asked the hiring manager on last year's meeting, so tell me about those Glassdoor reviews. He said, well, most of them are true,
Oh, my goodness.
but we're working on it. And
Right.
That's something.
I thought, okay, it's good that you admitted they're true, but it's bad that they're true because it's
Right,
a
right.
toxic environment.
Can't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was willing to admit that, yeah, they had some issues.
And sometimes the positions that have the bad reviews are not the positions that you are applying for. And there may be very different subcultures within the organization, whether it's production or sales or something like that. And then you're in the IT department, and that's a great place to work, you know. So be conscientious about what you see, but ask those questions, you know. I've worked in those companies that had those bad reviews, and you know, when you work in an outsourced sales company and everybody's on the phone, you know, placing calls, that's sort of a boiler room. We don't really advertise. Boiler room, come on, get one, you know. But at the same time, when you know, when we were trying to hire for the marketing team, you know, they were seeing those things. So different cultures between different parts of the organization. Not that they were, that's not really a good excuse, but it was the reality. You had a question, sir?
Just how do companies verify that you have a degree, or what the degree is, and they approach, you know, university that you post?
Yeah, they typically will do that during the background and reference checks. They're not going to spend.
The year that you graduated, just doesn't.
Yeah, it does give them the year when they do that research. When they're doing that, though, at that point, that's at the time that they're doing background checks, which means that you've already got the offer. And so they're just verifying that you're not lying. You know, they're just verifying that you actually do have a degree from that university. So at that point in the game, don't worry about it. Yes, ma'am?
Researching the company, there's a great option using Reference USA, which you can get a subscription, or you can get into it if you have a library card from the Round Rock Library, which is free. You get to bring your driver's license.
What's the name of it again?
It's Reference USA, and it has financial health, it has the historical sales volume and number of employees, and it also has the execs. Some of the companies have execs and names and contact information if possible. They have a lot of information on that research, but get a library card from Round Rock Library, and it's referenceusa.com. Yes, it's on their website, but you have to have to get into it and access it, you have to enter in your library card number.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, if you, a little point of thing, if you live in a different city other than Round Rock, so you're not going to get a Round Rock library card, you still can. But if you have an Austin library card or Pflugerville or one of the others, they all will intersect under the Texas library system or whatever. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, regarding your last bullet up there, location, Austin's not known for being corporate headquarters, and oftentimes they don't publish where in Austin they are. Have you ever found a way to find company locations in Austin?
Google,
Google.
I found them all.
And that doesn't always help. No, you're
I
right.
often, we're in Austin, it's a big city.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't always help. The reason that I put that on there is if you live in Leander and you have a job, a posting that's down near the airport, is that something that you're really willing to do? Now, I will tell you on the flip side, don't put your address on your resume. Part of it is for privacy. But the other part is that people that read your resume will make a judgment on your commute based on the address that you give them. And so if they say, you know, they see that you're in Buda and there's a position up in Northwest Austin, they'll go, oh, they're not going to make that commute, and they'll chunk you out. And it's like, wait, oh, let me make that decision, or maybe I'm moving, you know, or whatever. But so leave the address off of your resume. Just have your phone number and your email address. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, because the phone number is also going to give an indication of your location.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah, yeah, and that's fine. Austin area is good. But anyway, so the location, you know, like you said, sometimes it's hard to figure out for some companies. You know, if you can go on their website and call them and then ask them, you know, go covert. Go covert and find out anything you can find out about them. You know, you can make up names and anything else. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. You know, you're just trying to find out some general information. Don't go, hey, I just put in my application and I want to know all kinds of stuff about you. Let's see. Yeah, Glassdoor, you know, Indeed, Google, there are some others out there that do have reviews on the companies itself, even the social media, the companies, Facebook and LinkedIn profiles will have things where people post about them and that kind of stuff. So look around.
Slack is good too.
Slack. Oh, yeah. I forgot to put that one on there. Slack. Y'all heard that? But yeah, so make your decision before you go through the time and the trouble to apply for a position. And then, when you actually go to the application, one profile per company. Don't try to get cute and make separate profiles because it just ticks off the recruiters, frankly. And it's not going to do you any good. If you have applied for the same or similar jobs or several jobs at the same company, you know, that's kind of expected. Don't worry about it. You know, you may fit for one and you not for another. It may be a good time this time and not the last 3 times. So just still use the same company profile, but update it. Update that profile and keep it updated if you're going to continue to make applications for them. Follow the instructions. Even if it's the most ungodly form ever. Anybody apply for the state jobs? Pack a lunch, right? It's going to take you a while. But have all that prep work done so that you can copy and paste easier into it. But it's not just the state. There are some other companies that still have really long applications. And if it's a job you really want, and it's a job that you have the qualifications for, you know, sit down, follow the instructions, fill out everything that you can fill out, put in A in the blanks that you should, and then go back and check it. Make sure that it matches your resume. So if you're using certain skill sets and things that are applicable to this job that aren't, make sure that you've adapted the resume and you keep track of which resume you're using for which application so that you can link those things together so that your resume will match those things. And then, we just said that. Make sure your resume matches the jobs. Yes, sir?
Are there state applications where they ask us things that are required, but others are not asked
As much as possible. As much as possible. Some things are, some things just don't apply. They may apply to other positions within that organization, and they don't apply to you. Sometimes it's like certifications and things, right? Some people don't have certifications, don't need a certification for the job they are, but there's a spot for you to do that. Put NA.
But some of those have address as well. They ask you for your address.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you not give an address, or do you?
No, on the application form, you put in the address. On your resume, don't put your address. Yeah. Because the resume is going to go out to a broad scope of people. But on the application form, fill it out. Fill it out completely. And then some of them will allow you to upload your resume, and then it will parse the information and fill in the blanks for you. Beware. Be very aware. I don't know how many times I've gone, oh, good. It's going to do, and it's all over the place. Nothing applies, nothing matched. So go back and be very judicious. And some of them are going to be a help, and others not so much. So if they're uploading those resumes, be sure also if they upload the resume and they keep the resume intact as an attachment, be sure that you can open that back up. In most cases, you can go back and look and see it. Open it back up and make sure it comes across in the format that is readable, because sometimes they're not really readable in whatever format they are, and so you may have to go back and eliminate that resume and upload it in a different format. I've said this before, but this is the time to make sure that your cover letter is adapted to that particular job and the things that they're looking for. This is a great place to, you don't need to tell your whole history in your cover letter. Your application and your resume say that for you. But you should highlight maybe a couple of things that you want them to highlight, or overcome an objection if there's an objection, if there's something in your history or background that you don't want them to consider, all right? You want to say, hey, don't worry about that. I've got this covered here. So those are great places to do that, is in the cover letter. And then proofread it up and down. Take the extra time. Look for little bitty typos, and then look for things that have been, that you thought were uploaded from the resume or whatever, and were misplaced or just mushed around as a technical term I think we use. So think about what is the character that I'm trying to display, and it should be as much attention to detail as possible in the application, because the recruiters or the hiring managers, first thing when they start seeing typos and other mistakes is, if they're not going to pay attention to those things before they're hired, are they going to pay attention to them after they're hired? Right? So I think that's my helpful hints from Heloise. What other kinds of, see, I look around this audience and most of you got that. Right. But what are some of the experiences that you've had with job applications online? Yes, sir.
Texas Workforce Commission, over 50 jobs, application, go in there, it takes me out to a link, and it's an entry-level position.
Yeah.
Advertise one thing and it's another.
Yeah, you'll make the switch, right? I have to say, as great as the TWC job bank is, it's just as frustrating because of those kinds of things.
I'm starting to see job links that are like really clickbait for some job search company. And you go in and you click it, and instead of being the actual job application, it's an application for like Monster or some other,
Right,
I don't want to pick on Monster, but they're,
yeah, they're a culprit.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
they're,
You get halfway through and you realize this isn't
yeah.
a job.
Yeah, those are more prevalent than not. Or, you know, they want you to be, you know, they want this great, wonderful manager, and really what they're trying to do is make you an insurance salesman. And that was completely different than what was advertised. So, yeah, you have to beware. Yes, ma'am?
I could use some tips on proper spelling of things, because like if I say e-learning one word and they've spelled it e-learning, it's a mismatch, right? Or if I spell out computer-based training, they'll say CBT, and then it's a mismatch. And I can put CBT in parentheses to take care of that one, but how do I deal with some of those other things where we're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but we've just missed it? Somebody spelled job aid, A-I-D-E, which is incorrect. I spelled it aid, and I was like, I'm right, but you're not gonna find me.
Right.
Yeah.
The only, you know, hint for that is look at what they have in the job posting
And just change it.
and try to mimic what they have in the job posting if you have any of those same words in there. That is a good hint. The job posting is the biggest hint that you can get for keywords and that kind of thing. It's not the only, but it is how you do the correct report. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I've seen a lot of is that there will be a job that is posted directly by the company and then also posted by headhunters or recruiters. And sometimes they say that it's for some other company, and sometimes they don't. But you see that I've seen the job description and go, oh yeah, this is the same one. So, so I have learned to watch for those. And my preference is I always choose to go and go for the
Directly to the company.
The direct hire. I figure,
Yeah.
at least arguably, it gives me a little more negotiating room in theory.
Yeah, yeah, I typically will do that too. If I see two, I will typically go directly to the company or to the company website and see if they have that on there, just to sort of cut out the middleman. But sometimes it's not a bad idea to call that staffing company and find out, you know, because they may have an automatic, what's it called, Carla? Where they pull stuff off your, when they scrape the job postings off your website, but they've already hired out a recruiter, and so sometimes the recruiter really is the right people to go to. So call the recruiter and find out. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Well, it seems like there's this, we don't get a lot of communication back. Is that kind of a standard? Like you put your resume out and then, I mean, I get a feedback, but, which I really do appreciate, but then it just feels like they go on a black hole and nobody ever communicates with you. That's one thing. And then I know a lot of people are using now the idea of Workday. That's become a really popular one. My own institution uses Workday as well, which on our side, when we use it, and me as a hiring manager, I actually do have to communicate with the candidates. If I don't do my final communication, my job never closes in the software. But it seems like not all companies have tracked it that way, so that their workday doesn't close out, and at least send the candidates some final notification, like we closed it out, so that you still don't get any communication, which is a little frustrating that there's not a process. And then I feel like I'm constantly filling out with every company that's now using Workday, this is another Workday app. I wish there was some way.
Yeah. And the funny thing is there are some companies that use certain applicant tracking systems that they'll pull your application from another one if you're in this basic system, but those are few and far between. Yeah. I really, it's a frustration for me as well, and being on the HR side and doing recruiting occasionally myself, trying to get those responses to all the candidates timely is sometimes difficult, but it does feel like a black hole, and I know that those folks are busy, but that's part of their job too, and there's a lot that they could automate with that, even using the Indeed only and not having an applicant tracking system. So, that's there's not much you can do about it, but, you know, you can send a couple of follow-ups now and again, but after a certain length of time, you know, is it worth your time for that follow-up? Yes, sir, you had a question.
I've been out of work about 10 months. When I first started my search, I went with companies that I was associated with, semiconductor manufacturers in the area.
Sure.
And one in particular, there were 3 jobs. I have skills A through E, and there was one that was A, B, C, and C, D, E, and, you know, so I matched these 3 or 4 jobs. So I applied for those jobs.
Sure.
Never heard anything back, never went moving forward. Well, they used another company for the initial screen.
Right.
Never heard anything. So over time, over the 10 months, I've applied for 12 positions. Give me the same position, come back with a different job number. And so rarely get a response. Rarely get a response. Or I get the response, you're impressive. We really like what we see here, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate. That's the response I got. So I finally get through. The screening company gets me through the first person, and I would do a phone screen with it.
Right.
I do the phone screen with them. And they go, you know, looking at your profile, you applied for 12 different jobs here. What happened to those other 12 applications?
Sure, you tell me.
That against me.
Yeah.
They say, well, what did you do here? And it's like, well, I wish I knew.
Right.
But it seemed like the way they asked the question, the way they approached it, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, I got a response to 3 of those. And when I kind of get, you know, I get passionate when I talk about stuff.
Right.
You know, please tell me.
Right.
And then they take that kind of as a negative. It's like, well, I'm fine.
Right.
I'm so frustrated with that. There's 3 different companies that use the same.
But I just want to work for you so much.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about my work. We're passionate about this conversation. Let me do what I do.
Right.
You help me.
Yeah, and, you know, it's much like the question about the black hole, right? Sometimes the applicant tracking system has those keywords or other things that automatically, you know, parse things over into the no pile. And frankly, as a practitioner myself, I hate that. I would rather take the time to look through the resumes and decide for myself, because you can lose a lot of great talent by using that parsing system. But a lot of companies use it, you know, and so I think the questions to ask are, what are the keywords that will get me looked at? Because obviously I haven't figured them out yet, you know. You know, I can do this job, but I don't do the job search very well, you know. So, you know, do the help me help you, because by the time we're talking, you can see what my qualifications are. So, you know, ask them for advice. Yes, sir.
Your feelings after applying for a job, filling out the application, and getting a response back, saying thank you, your job is you applied for this job. What are your feelings about showing up at the place of business with the name of, say, sales manager, you know work there, because you look for them on LinkedIn.
Right.
You show up with your cover letter and resume and say, I just want to speak to Rob Smith and see if I might introduce myself in person.
Yeah. Some places that'll work, and some places you won't get past the gatekeeper. What I would probably do is try to make those connections on LinkedIn, and then try to set up a meeting. You know, whether it's a phone meeting or an in-person meeting, but try to set up a meeting with that individual. And, you know, whether it's, you know, try to find maybe whether it's the sales manager or the IT, you know, CTO or whatever. But I would get personal with that individual, because almost never are you going to show up and they go, oh yeah, come on in and I'll show you Joe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because they'd have a whole, yeah, it would be a parade, you know, and so the gatekeepers are there for a reason. Somebody else had it.
Question about who should you address your cover letter to? Should you address it, kind of look up, you know, on the company site about us, find out who the senior person is kind of over that role, or should you address it to who may concern, or to the recruiter, head of HR? Really matter.
6 of one, half dozen the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's in the generic
Hiring manager.
Yeah, your hiring manager, yeah, something generic, because you don't always know who it's gonna be.
Right.
And, you know, unless you're applying for the executive role, you're probably not gonna get it to the CEO, you know, that stuff anyway. It's gonna go to a recruiter or an HR generalist that's screening those things. You know, to whom it may concern is fine, but you could put hiring manager or something like that that's good and generic.
Put a specific person's name on there, they look at, say, this guy's off base, or is this call? It's interesting, but let me read it.
Frankly, and I'll tell you, you know, and this is just the Susan Word personal way of looking at cover letters and resumes, I don't even pay attention to that top stuff. I go to the meat of what it is, I'll go to the body of the cover letter, I go to the body of the resume, and I haven't even looked at any of that initial stuff up at the top, the header, because I could care less. I want to see if they've got the goods first, and then I'll look up at the other stuff. And I know an awful lot of recruiters. Would you guys agree with that?
I have a question about the application tracking systems. Are they customized according to each company or terminology fitting a particular sector or industry? And how often are they updated?
That all depends on the HR department. It all depends on the technology or the technical abilities of the, you know, of the team that's working on it. So, yes, every company has their own one, and you know, they can all, you know, you can have, you know, 10 companies that have iCIMS, and they all have it set up a little bit differently. There's some similarities, but they're a little bit different. But they may or may not have set up the, you know, automatic responses, or they may or may not have set up the, you know, some of the other parsing and that kind of stuff. So they all tailor it to their own, you know, their own individual needs or capabilities. Yes, ma'am?
I was going to say real quick, as somebody that did a lot of hiring at my last company, putting someone's name can also super backfire. I had a lot of applicants that applied and they put the CEO's name on there, and I thought, you pretentious ass. I don't know, is hiring for this entry-level job.
Right.
You know, and so sometimes that backfires, like you think you're so amazing for this entry level, but you get all the way to the CEO. Whereas, you know, just to whom it may concern, or hiring manager, or, to be honest, I'd rather have, hey, you.
Right.
You can put the CEO on there.
Right. Especially if you're in the you know, the job portal. If you're doing the online application and stuff, the CEO is not going to be seeing that stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
I had probably 300 applications and I was hiring for 100.
Yeah. You know, if I sent more than 10 applications to any hiring manager, they'd shoot me, right? I do all that screening well before they get any of that stuff. So, you know, unless you know the CEO and you know that you have a connection and you're communicating directly with them, don't put them on the portal and that stuff, because it will, you know, it's not going to do you any good. So back to that. Yes, ma'am?
One of the tools that I was recommended when I went through my outplacement coaching is JobScan, which was recently bought by LinkedIn. Right. And when you do use their tools, you copy and paste the description of the job, you copy and paste your resume, and it actually asks you for the company name that you're applying for, because then they have history of what kind of applicant tracking systems they're using.
Oh, sweet. I don't know that.
Yeah, that's an update.
Yeah.
So it actually helps.
And tell me the name of that again?
JobScan.
JobScan.
And you get free scans if you refer other people.
JobScan.co.
Yeah.
JobScan.co.
Yes, and as a person who has JobScan, if you refer somebody else to JobScan, you both get some free scans, so if you're not already, come talk to me.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
I can refer you.
That's how I get all my Dropbox amount. Yes, ma'am.
I've always been under the impression that tracking systems don't like functional resumes, they always want chronological. Have you had success with your functional resume?
I have.
Gone through a scanning system?
The thing is it's really about having those keywords in there, because the scanning systems aren't really looking for format, they're really looking for the keywords. So it's it's a pain to change all your keywords for different jobs and stuff in your resumes, but it's really scanning for those keywords rather than the format. Frankly, you know, when you become of a certain age, you don't want to go back to 1981.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the things that I want to, you know, if I want to tell them I was a Black Hawk freaking helicopter pilot, I'm not going to put that I was there from 81 to 87, right? So that's part of the reason I don't use a chronological. That's my personal preference, but I do work hard to make sure that I get the keywords and get the gist of the job in there as much as I can. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had there was an online application about 3 weeks ago that I applied to. One of the requirements, 5+ years in finance. So Trick ATS, 5+ years in diverse finance was my first summer in Bill. Had a phone interview before I came here this morning with the CFO. He called me on that because he said, "You have more than 5 years finance, don't you?" Yeah, but he was looking at my resume, so it was,
Right.
fortunately I was able to bail it out by diverting the subject to something outside the job.
So I was going to say 5+ works, and frankly, if it got you to actually a conversation, yeah, I'd use that every time.
But so with your recommendation going forward, if this doesn't work out, would be to just verbatim that again?
Yeah, if they're asking those particular things, or you have, you know, in there where it asks that. Now, if they're asking you all of your job history throughout the application, you know, you're going to be honest about all of those things, but, and just like you are with your resume, but if they're asking you a question, they say, "Do you have 5 years of experience?" Yes. Don't answer any more or any less, right? Get me to the next step. The whole point of a resume or a job application is to get you to the next step. That's it. So put yourself in position to get to the next step. Yes, ma'am?
So I have a lot of years of experience with one company. And it dates me when I put it on that very first one. I've been with them
Right.
since Eloise.
Right.
Was born. And so, but I've had an opportunity to change lots of people in that environment. How do you break that up? So that
I've
it
seen,
looks like
yeah.
more than,
Yeah.
you know, like the last 10 years, and then say,
So this position, like the position that you had and the years for that, and this position and the years for that, so that you do break that up. So one, it shows progression rather than one big lump, and the other is that it then will kind of help you in that big span.
both ways, and I just put, you know, there's some previous experience, which is pertinent to a lot of jobs.
Right. You know, and a lot of people tell you don't need to go back more than 10 years, but we know better, right? So make a, yeah, don't answer the high school year. Yes, sir.
On that, you want to be careful with these loading up your resumes, because I did that. I put, you know, I was with this company for 10 years, but in that 10 years, I had 3 different roles. What the ATS system will do, it takes that date and says, okay, you were there for 10 years, and then you have to take that line out with the automatic thing. So that's why you want to review it.
Yeah, because,
Treats it like a whole new
and
job.
oftentimes I've seen the full span and then subcategories with all the different jobs and the years for those. So there are different ways to do that.
The one ATS case that I really liked it for what it was, it picked it up and it picked up the dates, and where there were previously, you know, it started dropping off dates and it loaded it and stuff. So it loaded the last 10 years. And I assume that's in my resume, and also the second.
Right. Yes, sir?
So what would be the best way to do that? I was in the same queue for 15 years, 3 different company names, 5 different jobs.
Well, yeah, I did the same thing. I was with a company and I didn't move an inch, and the name on the building outside changed. That's great. You know, sometimes you have to be careful that they don't think you're job hopping. It's like, really, I was in the same seat. But you know, if the you're in the same place in the company change, then you're listing each company. When you're with the same company, then you may have the primary and then the subcategories, or list the each job title separately.
So if they change their name, the company itself has changed its name several different times?
Yeah, that's a different company.
It's a different company?
Yeah.
But, so do I put what it was called when I was there? Or?
Yeah. No, what it was when you were in that position. What it was when you were in that position. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the online assessments that we have asked to do, what was that apply for reasons? So if you're asked to do an assessment, does that mean that they already like your application? And what we do in the next step, or is it part of the application?
It depends. So like you look at the Indeed stuff that they have rolled out over the last year to 2 years with those little assessments on there. Sometimes those are quick and dirty. They're a means of the employer or the recruiter to sort of get an additional look, right? Do you really have that skill? And we could debate whether they're any good or not, but that's still weeder. They're weeding you in or out, right? If you're further along in the process and they ask you to do an assessment, then it may be to get to that next step. So it just depends on where in the process you are.